Hey everyone, I was glad to see a lot of new faces at the workshop number 2. Last week we analyzed a lot of start music, start menu music to inspire our own compositions, and we kind of boiled it down to, what makes a title song successful. Simplicity, layering or changes you need to keep people interested. It needs to loop, that's pretty important, and it helps to have a pickup at the end. And of course, it needs to fit the emotion of the game. As composers, we need to support the developer's vision for the video game. This kind of applies to most video game songs, I realized after creating the first slideshow. With the exception of Start and Quiet. Well, this week will be a bit more on the technical side of video game audio. Before we get started, I figure I should explain a couple of things about programming for people that may have never programmed before. First, this video is not really going to be an excellent intro to programming, though I'll try to explain little bits here and there. Second, programming requires a lot of specialized syntax and the use of systems that you just can't possibly know about beforehand. Most of programming in Unity for me was Googling, how to do blank. And that's really the nice thing about Unity. It's that so many people use it. Hundreds and probably hundreds of people have had your exact problem before, so you can look it up. And finally, on our list of 3 things, with those previous 2 in mind, the intention of this workshop is to show you what you could do. I wouldn't expect you guys to do everything we're going to be talking about today. It's kind of unreasonable for especially beginner programmers. So in this workshop, I'm going to go a bit beyond what I think is reasonable, just to show you the stars you can reach for, kind of. And they might not be too far off. So speaking of glimmering and fantastic stars, let's jump right into our first audio system example. Maybe the greatest game on Earth, Cat Meat. For the record, this video is not me playing. The person playing is not very talented, as you might notice. But let's just listen to their audio system, and I'll let it play out. that is the looping point for the one song in really all of the levels. As you can see, between scene transitions, there is no song change. And that is something that we can definitely do. This type of audio system that they have set up here is exactly what we're shooting for this workshop. It might seem a little basic. I know it's not Hans Zimmer or something, but it might be a little more complex than you think. One more thing to point out before we get into the code side of things is that CatMeet actually has sound effects as well. I know they just kind of it's easy to listen to them and kind of store them away implicitly, but they are an active part of the audio system. There are sound effects for picking up coins and for jumping, as you can hear. Oops. And finally for dying. Each triggering independently. So, without further ado, let's open our provided Unity project. This is the one that hopefully there will be a link in the description for right here. Oops. I've opened up under scenes here, I've opened up the locomotion test scene. You might notice in our assets section of the project folder, which as a quick review shows us all the things that could be in our game that maybe aren't yet. These are our, assets for creating scenes. Our project folder is a bit of a mess here. We've got some scripts here that are clearly outside of the script folder. We've got a whole ton of folders. It's just kind of hectic, and as you can tell by our console log, not everything is going perfectly in the game. This is because this is an actual game jam game. This is the completed project that came down to the wire on the day of a game jam, and I figured I would provide you guys with this because this is exactly the type of thing that you might end up seeing when you're trying to implement an audio system. So it's going to be a little bit of a challenge, just trying to wrap your head around this messy hierarchy here with just garbage, but everything is pretty cohesive once it gets into the game. I'm going to remove the existing audio system, or at least I'll disable it. And I'll just play through a little bit of the game so you guys can see exactly what's going on. We have a character. They can jump with, move with WASD, space to jump. They can die on these spikes. Very nice. It's pretty fundamental. It's a platformer. And over here we have a power-up, our first power-up in the game. So what are we trying to do? We're trying to add one looping track, like in CatMeet, and sound effects. As mentioned previously, Unity has a kind of pre-built-in audio system. We have audio listeners. You can see I'm checking the box in the bottom right. And we have, under audio sources. The reason the audio listener is on the camera because the camera is in pretty much every scene. I can't imagine a scene without a camera being very successful. And I'm adding this audio source onto the camera because, why not? Our music is going to be playing all the time. It should probably exist all the time. So what audio clip am I going to add here? You might notice in our assets section here, there's not really a section called music or, art that's that generic that might hint as to where our music is. In this specific project, I've decided to put our audio in kind of the obscure location resources audio. Now there's a specific reason for that. We'll get into that a bit later, but for the time being, just kind of, roll with the punches here. Here I have composed 4 different themes for this game, and we have, spoilers, a little bit of a ding sound effect. It's pretty fantastic. So back to our main camera. Remember, we select the main camera and all of its information is going to show up in the inspector here. Audio source, and we're going to assign the audio clip theme 0, why not? Notice that it has Play on Awake already enabled, and we're going to enable loop, why not? We probably don't need to mess with any of the priority or volume stuff, none of the spatial blend. So let's just hit play, and with any luck, we'll be hearing some audio. It's nice. It's, calm. I thought it fit. That's why I composed it for the game. You'll see the other themes are kind of an expansion on that. But that's really all we have to do if we just want a looping audio source in the game, or a looping, music theme. We just have to put it in and enable loop. So, 50% done, right? Clearly, adding the rest of the SFX are just going to be a breeze. It's going to be equally as easy. So, well, let's try adding another audio source. We need to add a ding here somewhere, just as a test. Ooh, it's a pretty ding. Let's add it. Let's just try adding it to the main camera. Maybe it'll automatically play where we want to, right? Unity is pretty intuitive. Let's give this a shot. We'll add another audio source, a second audio source, put our ding in, and well, the ding worked, but it's not really providing its sound at any particular time, and I'll do a little trick here. If you go to Game and deselect Maximize on Play, typically it will automatically be selected. And then you can split your game into scene views here. This is all, when you first open this project, the tabs here might all be in a different order. It's okay. It's whatever you want it to be, as I'm demonstrating here by splitting the scene in game. When I hit play, because we're not maximized, we can see in the inspector on the right side here that the audio source is just kind of hanging around, even though it's served its single ding purpose. So let's try and get it to do something more exciting. And the way that we're going to do that is by adding a script that is going to manage when we are playing sound effects. That is going to go under scripts. Let's just put it right in. I'm going to right click and hit create and click the C# script option. JavaScript is another good option, especially for beginners, but it's going to have some different syntax than the example that I'm providing here. So just stick with C# for now, and maybe if you have experience in coding, transition to JavaScript if that's what you prefer. And when we name our script here, it's kind of specific. We can't have any spaces in the name, or I believe certain special symbols we just can't include. So let's stick with something pretty vanilla, like sound effects controller. Really long name, I know. It'll get appended here so that it fits into the name box here. And when we double click on this, first you can see in the inspector it's showing some information, but when we double click on it, it's actually going to open up in an IDE, an integrated development environment. And basically that just means a place where we can code. This specific IDE you can see with the icon in the top left corner. It's called Visual Studio. This is probably not the one that's going to open by default. You might see Mono Develop. Either of these are going to work just fine. They really do the same thing, even though they look different. And they'll have all the same text here. So you can see Sound Effects Controller is the name of our class. That's kind of like the scripting term for script. And we have some starting functions here. We have, or preset functions here. We have start and update. You can see they have commented in just normal text. You can actually write whatever you want in code, so long as you precede it with 2 slashes. So this won't be a big issue writing test test. And their description that they've provided is use this for initialization. Basically all that means is the start function runs when this script starts. So probably it's going to run when you hit that play button in the top here next to the pause. Update is called once per frame, they say. The way that's easiest to remember this is obviously they're going to put this comment in every time you create a new script, but also it's like the updating on a TV screen. Actually, TVs, and this might be different for different types, TVs, and technology has definitely advanced since the olden days, but TVs actually don't push all of the pixels on your screen at once. They kind of track down, one at a time, like to simulate like this over and over and over again for the entire screen. And what they're doing when they track down is they change each individual pixel one at a time. They are, so to speak, updating it. So it happens several times really, really fast. Neither of these are really what we want our ding sound effect to do. We don't want it to just play when it starts. It needs to be playing when it does something special. And we don't want it to be playing all the time. That would really suck. So instead, what we're going to do, we're going to make a new function. It's going to be public void play clip. Excuse my naming convention for those of you that prefer different ones. This is just what I like for when I'm calling clips in particular. What do we need to do in this function? All we need to do is create an audio source. Apologies if my typing is too loud. And add it to the camera. Why not, right? That's where we've been putting all of our other audio sources. We need to assign the right clip to it. And we need to play the clip. This is what we did, directly, verbatim, in the inspector previously. We selected our camera, put an audio source on it. I'll actually remove this one because it's redundant now. Put an audio source on it, put the right clip in here, and we selected loop. That's another thing. We don't want it to loop. So that is going to be by default disabled. We won't have to worry about it. So how do we go about this? Well, creating an audio source. We can't just create an audio source in imaginary space. Just like in the inspector here, it needs to actually be a component on a game object. It can't just be floating around. So we're actually going to need to add it. Add component of type audio source. For those of you who know what I'm probably going to be coding, this will look quite wrong, and we'll get there, don't worry. This is intentional. We're going to add a component of type audio source to an object, though, and we want the camera in particular. So we're going to use one of these kind of predefined Unity functionalities It's just called camera. It's really easy. See how it highlights blue after I type it? It's because it's a specific like Unity logic set that we can tap into. So we're going to call camera.main, and we need to get the game object in particular, because we can't add a game object to a component, which would be this camera here. We need to add the game object to add the component to the game object. And this will successfully add our audio source to it. Our next step is to play the right clip, or excuse me, assign the right clip to it. And that is a bit more tricky, because we can't just type in something like audio source play clip. You know, it's not that simple. We need to reference this particular audio source. We can't just, you know, reference an arbitrary one. So what we're going to do is we're going to create this as a variable. We're going to say audio source A equals, and now whenever we type the letter A, I know this is absurd, but whenever we type the letter A, it's going to be referencing the specific component that we've added to the camera here. So I can type a.clip equals clip here. Ooh, there are a lot of autofills. There we are. That, as you can see by the big old red lines under it, is not really functional code. We need to pull the clip, just like from before, from our resources and audio folder here. That's why I've put our audio in the resources folder. It's because Unity actually has some special functionality for loading files. So under resources and audio is just the right place for these to be, because we have the resources.load function. And we're going to do it of type audio clip. Resources.load is only going to load resources within the resources folder. That's an important thing to note. And actually, as you can see, our file path isn't just resources. It's resources/audio/whatever our sound effect is. So when we type in the destination for the thing that we're loading, it's going to be audio slash and then the name of our clip, which is ding. I believe, well, we don't need the file extension for resources.load. So now we have created audio source A, which is the one that's on our main camera. We have assigned its clip, and we need to play it. That's nice and easy. A.play. Ta-da! This isn't actually an entirely necessary line of code because play on awake is enabled by default, but I like to put it in there just for posterity's sake. So, what is going to happen when we run this in start? Is it going to be successful? Let's find out. Remember, start is going to run a function immediately. We've created our script. Surely this is going to be successful, right? I didn't hear a ding there. Only the one, of course, in the music, and those are intentionally similar sounding. But the reason for that is that we haven't actually added our new script, sound effects controller, to any of the objects in the hierarchy. Remember, the project will not automatically implement any of the things in it. You need to drag them into the scene. So let's put this script now on our inspector. And voila, here it is. It's a component. It can also be loaded just to reinforce the idea that all of these items are components by typing in the name of our file. So sound effects controller, it pops up right there in the add a component dialog. Now let's see if it plays on start. That is a big old ding to me. Alrighty. The last thing... Oh. Now we're going to need to trigger this clip whenever a special thing happens. Just like in cat meat, it triggered the jump sound effect whenever you pressed jump. We're going to be doing something similar to that in the update function. Every frame we're going to call using an if function. We're going to check if the system detects an input. This is another kind of predefined Unity system for input detection. And we're going to detect the key E. As you can see by this drop down here, all sorts of keys are acceptable. This is just kind of like a nice way to organize them with keycode.e. Don't worry too much about this specific line of code. It's not entirely relevant to us audio designers, but it is important. So now we will run play clip inside of our update function, and we'll check if it plays whenever we press E. That seems successful. In fact, I'll mute our other audio source just so we can hear it better. Uh-oh, there's something going on in our inspector here. All of our old ding sound effects are staying alive, which is really ugly and really not very efficient. I mean, look at all this garbage that's contained in every one. There's so much information. We need to figure out a way to get rid of it as soon as it's done. And for that, we're going to use the destroy function, because we hate these clips. It doesn't require any fancy, just like camera.main did or input.getKey did. Doesn't require any fancy kind of reference. Destroy is a pretty universal function in Unity. And we're just going to destroy A, our new audio clip. But we don't want to do it as soon as the clip plays. We need to time exactly how long the clip is. And fortunately for us, destroy has what's called an overload. It's like kind of a second function that it can do by adding this comma in and typing in the length of the clip. So if we were going to wait 1 second, we would type in 1. But we don't want to wait 1 second. We want to wait exactly as long as the audio clip is. So we're going to check for the clip's length by typing a.clip.length. Now, let's go back to our project. Whenever I press E, an audio source will be created down here, and it will be destroyed right after it's done playing. You might hear it sounds kind of cut off. I promise that's not Unity's fault. That is the fault of the bad ding sound effect. It doesn't actually hold out the sustain, so don't worry about that too much. So we're successful, right? If we only ever want to play audio/ding, you know, what's an alternative solution? I guess we can make a whole new function for every time we want to play a different clip. Or we can do what's called passing a variable. So in play clip here, just like in, see how destroy has things that are written inside of it, we can create a kind of way to transfer information from anywhere else that is calling it to where it actually is. And that is by making variables between these parentheses. So we're going to make string clip name, and we are going to actually, this is kind of tricky, we're going to remove ding from our resources load file path, and we're going to add clip name, which is a variable. Clip name can be whatever we pass in. You'll notice that play clip is now kind of having a hissy fit over here at the top. That's because it needs something to be in there. Unlike destroy, where you can have 1 or 2 operands. In playclip, we need to have one because there's only one version of playclip in existence, and it has to have this clip name in it. So inside there, we're going to put ding because that's what we want to play. And now, even if we have other files inside, say we want to play like boom or something like that, no matter what we pass in, so long as the file exists in the resources audio file path, it will play. It's really convenient. With this, that is about as far as cat meat gets. I mean, we've made it. With one final exception, we don't want it to just be when they press a button. It should also be when they interact with something. And these power-ups are kind of like a nice midway point. And that's actually what I intended the ding sound effect to happen on. So if we click on our power-up either in the scene view or in the hierarchy, and scroll down in the inspector, we can see there's a checkpoint script already on it. That's really convenient. So we open up this checkpoint script, and you can see I've already kind of cheated here. If the script will move, I think it's having a bit of an issue. Let me close it out. There we are. I will open you here. I've already cheated, and there's some old-fashioned code from a previous audio controller that I've made. So I will comment that out and write essentially the same thing. So when we hit it, we want to play clip from this sound FX controller. But it can't just be a generic sound effects controller. It has to be specifically the one on our main camera here. Remember, we added this forever ago to our main camera. So I'll go to our checkpoint script, and I'm going to type in camera.main.getComponent. And that is, remember, all of our scripts are called components. That's going to get the component of type sound FX controller. That's exactly what we're looking for. And we are going to, from there, call dot play clip. Look at that. And play clip wants us to have a name, so our name will be ding. Hopefully, we can remove all of this stuff, just have our play clip function, and once we hit this checkpoint, a ding will sound. To try and aid our listening experience, I'll remove our music audio source from the main camera. Ooh. If only I was better at this game. That's one thing that Game Jam games are notorious for. It's being quite difficult due to time constraints for testing. So here we go. Success. And it removes itself. That is everything that Catmeat did. I'm sorry that that took forever to explain, but let's take a break. Let's just take a breather and go back through and look at some other audio systems and how they might be implemented. Catmeat we have conquered. So up next, Viscera cleanup detail. Now it might be hard to hear in this recording, but the sound is actually coming from, in the very center of the screen here, you can see on a stool there is a jukebox, and it is spatial sound. Remember that spatialization, or I think it's just spatial blend meter that is on every audio source? You can adjust that and put it on an object to create the same thing. This effect works best with headphones. That's a pretty fundamental way to add music that we can all probably do. So let's look at something a bit more complex with the Binding of Isaac for music. So on entering this room, they actually cut the music volume so that they can play a special sound effect, and then they transition and fade back in. But that's not quite what I'm focusing on for this particular game. Here we have to have a direct transition to a quieter, more ambient song. And a transition back. And this is done much in the same way that we transition, or we played our sound effects, except the Binding of Isaac just removes the previous audio source and adds a new one for music. So enough of the Binding of Isaac. Let's move on to Shovel Knight. This is, again, a slightly more complex version of the previous system. Sorry, I'm quite sick. In Shovel Knight, we have two tracks actually playing simultaneously, two kind of renditions of the same song, two arrangements. And what they do is they mute one of the songs immediately, so that only the other is playing, and then when the time comes, they transition between the two just by inverting their volumes. So, like in the Binding of Isaac, when we enter a new room, the music changes, but in Shovel Knight, it's going to be a seamless change instead of just restarting the music. And I'll skip ahead to that section here. And it's pretty subtle, so, put your listening specs on, so to speak. It's right after he exits this screen to the right. Right there. So you can hear it is definitely the same song, and it actually has to be the same duration for it to loop perfectly, but it transitions between the two to create kind of a different atmosphere for this interior shop and help differentiate the two different scenes. So let's skip to when he exits. And again, we jump back to that exterior arrangement. It's actually a tricky and little subtle thing that you can use to add a lot to your games, and that is again by playing both tracks simultaneously and immediately muting one, and then swapping between the two as they continue. Up next is Breath of the Wild. This game has great music, but I'm actually going to show you something a bit more nuanced than just music. It's pretty late here, right about here. And really listen here to the sound effects and exactly what's going on, because there's some pretty impressive things happening. right there. It's all contained in that little action-packed segment. I know that may have seemed a bit dry, but there's a lot going on. So let's play it back here. And I'll give some explanation beforehand so that you can listen next time with hopefully opened eyes. What they've revealed here is that they have a different walking loop for a variety of scenarios. They have a walking loop for footsteps, for walking through grass, for walking on stone or hard surfaces, as well as one for the wooden shield that he's got equipped on his back, and for the great axe, which is going to be clanging against him. Not only that, but it times up perfectly with the footsteps that his character, or that the are visually being represented, and it changes dynamically based on how hard the surface of the ground is, all happening really fast. And how that is achieved is similar to Shovel Knight's music. All of these tracks are played simultaneously, and then they are transitioned between as they loop, so that you get this really cohesive and impactful sound effect set in the final product. Let's listen again. So walking around here, we have grass, a harder surface, back to grass. We transition to stone, and listen for a shield here. It's very subtle. It's a little clicking, kind of in between steps. And finally, the great axe. It's really quite impressive, and they actually, I believe, transition between, or they adjust the length of the sound effect so that it matches up with his footsteps. Very impressive, even if it goes widely unnoticed. Finally, we have Skyrim, just a great game with music that lends itself really well to being faded in and out and kind of immersing people. So what the game is doing here is it's detecting when combat is going to happen, and then it's going to play some corresponding music.
Where in Oblivion are we supposed to go? Where's the way out?
Notice for this whole first 12 seconds here, even though the character's weapons are out, the combat music is not playing. They were wise enough to not just detect when you have your weapon in hand, because a lot of players just forget that they have their weapon out all the time, and you wouldn't want a constant combat sound effect.
Just give me a minute.
Right here, very subtly, it comes in.
You can't beat me.
And it really kind of immerses you in the combat quite successfully. So that is really all that I wanted to show you guys today. Hopefully that wasn't a massive overload on the side of coding. I'm sure you're wondering, okay, Jacob, we've seen all this. Well, what did you do for this game? What's the deal with the 4 tracks? Let me remove our previous components that we added for our example and reinitialize mine. Here is what I came across. A pretty calm kind of starting sound effect set here, or not sound effect, but audio set. I didn't have time to implement a jumping or running sound effect, but that's because I was trying to implement a more complex audio system, which required a lot of composition. So we have a calm song to start. Every time we hit a checkpoint. Oh, I forgot something. Remember when I commented all that code out in the checkpoint script? That was my previous code. So I will go back in and save that. And let's give this another shot. I wish I was better at this game. So you can see we have a transition to a more complex arrangement. And my intent here was to try and make your progression through the game feel more and more exciting. So when we hit our next checkpoint, I'll go ahead and hit this lever. When we hit our next checkpoint, the music will evolve further yet, right here. So you can see we have a seamless transition between several arrangements of the same song. I think it turned out pretty well, especially considering the time constraints. Maybe I should pick up the shift. Be extra careful here, just so that we can hear the last song without too much of a hassle. You see, this one is not actually incredibly different, but it is a different mix. You'll hear that later on in the song. So that's all I have for you today. I hope, like I said, that wasn't too much of an overload. But I wish you the best of luck with downloading this project and peeking through it at least. I'm going to try to, if I have enough time this weekend, comment every single one of these scripts so you can see exactly what's going on in every line of the code. You might say, that's redundant and kind of a waste of time. Maybe it is, but I just want you guys to feel like this is kind of a more approachable project than, it might have seemed at first. I want you to be able to look through and see what's going on where, especially if you want to practice with this and try and implement your own music or your own audio system. Maybe whenever they hit an elevator, you want a loud elevator sound effect. Well, you can put it right in this elevator script and I'll have a nice description of where it might work best. Best of luck this week. I hope to see you, I think next week on Friday is going to be our next workshop. And have a nice week.